Hello everyone, and welcome to the hashtag Future of Work series presented by Peak Mindful. I am your host, Gabriella Marzola. I am a workplace planning consultant for Tangram Interiors, and I am also a member of the wellness team here at Peak Mindful. In this series, we dive deep into the perilous predictions as well as the preparations for all things considered future of work. Whether you work in an office all day, or whether you are working from home, or you are a student, or you're looking for a job, this show is here to provide guidance and perspective for you to perform better. Ever since COVID-19 has swept the globe, one thing has become perfectly clear. We do not have control over everything that happens in our lives. In the midst of a global pandemic, today we will be discussing an ominous epidemic that is sweeping the nation. More than 75% of Americans suffer from chronic stress. This condition is known as burnout, and not only is it contributing to 60% of human illness and diseases, but it's also seriously messing with our brains. Here today, I am talking with Martina Hullard. She is a neuroscience researcher at the University of California, Irvine, and she's also a yoga instructor. She's got everything going. So, hello, Martina.
Hey, how's it
Welcome.
going? Thank you.
Glad to have you here.
Thanks.
So today, I kind of want to get an idea of what it is that you do, what you're studying, and why you're interested in it and why you're doing this.
Yeah, so I study neuroscience right now as a staff member. So at the same time, I still do graduate level neuroscience research. Currently, we're working mainly for elderly adults, and at the neuroscience lab that I'm working at with Dr. Yasa, we mainly focus on memory and how different events can change memory, let that be emotional, let that be aging. So in and of itself, this topic I think is fascinating because we all age, and I think that we all go through those hopes in life where we don't really know where a memory is lacking, or is it something that we're just tired, or is it something has to do with being stressed out, is it has something to do with an emotional thing, or we're just getting old. We don't know, right? At this point, I think for us as millennials, we're not getting that old yet, so
But my memory is
hold
shot.
on. Yeah, so that's what I study, and I am interested in it. For longer term research, I'm more interested in the lifespan of adults and how to become more resilient. So resilience in and of itself is a fascinating topic. We do have currently at the Yasa Lab also an opportunity to work with folks who are centenarians, who are 90 years and older, possibly 100. And those folks actually have shown resilience because those folks have, their condition is to coming to the lab and they're mentally fine, so they don't have any underlying disease and et cetera, and we study them. And then after they pass away, they are required to donate their brains for us, and then that lab is looking at them. It's actually Dr. Claudia Kawash and Maria Carrada's lab, and they're the ones, and we just collaborate with them. But a couple of times when I had the chance and I was able to go and have a 3-hour discussion with them in a lab meeting, it was the most fascinating thing I ever heard. And that's when it kind of clicked in my mind. I'm interested in resilience. And then from a personal perspective, and I think a lot of people could share this with me, we're in this generation of everything is a little bit higher. So all of the expectations from parents, from ourselves, from the society, everything's a little bit higher than from the previous one. And sorry, Gen Zs, but it's the next one for you guys. It's coming up, and it's getting higher and higher. So there is an underlying issue of stress that has to do with people not just being students anymore, except for the people who can be, good for them, but the vast majority of people are not just students anymore. They have to do multiple things. They have to hold part-time jobs. They have to do the extracurriculars, so that you could just go in to get higher education done. And unfortunately, those standards are higher education now. You can't really do much with a high school degree, at least. Definitely not in Europe where I'm from, but most likely not in America either. So on the top of that, another thing that interests me very, very highly is people who have gone through extreme stressors or have been exposed to chronic stress, which is just an elongated stress that basically you just keep burning out and burning out and burning out, and there's not really a way out for you. And at that point, there's a possibility that you would be diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder or something along the lines of some sort of anxiety disorder. And a lot of people suffering from that. A lot of people seek therapy, and a lot of people are interested in curing themselves. And I wonder that if you've ever been exposed to that in your life, or if you've ever been diagnosed and you've gotten through it, how did you become more resilient? What did you do? And it could be in childhood, which is more related to trauma and issues like that. It could be mid-adulthood, which is mainly chronic illness and chronic anxieties, or any kind of illness that relates to anxieties. Or it could be anything later on in your life. It could be a Holocaust survivor person. So I'm just interested in, how do you cope with stress? And then how do you get up from that?
Right.
And part of the reason is why I also am interested in yoga teaching, because part of the yoga philosophy is to be in touch with yourself. And if you're stressed out, you're definitely not in touch with yourself, because your body is giving you all those signals, the pimples, the hair falling out, the bags under your eyes, the unable to eat, or overeating, or can't sleep, or sleep too much. All those kinds of things are telling you that, hello, something's wrong. So yoga is helping you to get through that. And throughout my training, I've learned some things, and I've only done the basics because that's how much time I had. But throughout those trainings, I learned that being in touch with yourself is one of the most important things, and one of the most primary steps that you can take in order to be able to get rid of the stress that you have. Okay. So that's why I'm interested in that.
Well, I like that a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. So, I mean, you are working as a yoga instructor. You're also a killer neuroscience researcher. Do you have anything else going on that you want to tell us?
Oh God, the list is long. Yeah, so I'm actually, as I mentioned, I'm working as a staff member right now. So I'm interested in applying to neuroscience graduate programs to get my PhD. So that's a hassle, because you gotta sell yourself basically of how well you can do research for the rest of your life. And yeah, that's a little bit difficult to think all that long and in the future forward, but I guess we'll just work with it, baby steps, right? At the same time, I'm a cat mom of 2, so they're really anxiety-provoking sometimes when they eat my plants, but otherwise they're really nice.
They're the children.
Yeah, and then I work for Peak Mindful, so yeah, I'm here most of the time as much as I can.
So you're basically a poster child for burnout right now? So in your own words, just give us what you would say burnout is in general.
It might be a little bit of a longer answer. So burnout in general is that exhaustion state that you are unable to come up from this state. So it's a lockdown state of anxiety where the possibility for the next burnout is even higher. So it's a state of exhaustion. What I mean by that is both mentally and physically. Maybe the person doesn't realize it yet, and on one side of the swing, for instance. So burnout is just when you try to focus, but you absolutely can't. And it's not necessarily because maybe you haven't slept enough or something like that. Things like that, it could contribute to that, of course. But it's a long process of trying to do your best, but there's not really a way to do it because there's just so much going on. Mm-hmm. Like, have you ever tried to just get away from a problem just to make sure that you think about it and then you kind of let it go, but then the next thing swoops in because something else is a big priority on your list.
Right.
And then the next thing, and then the next thing. And things don't get resolved, and they just pack onto each other, and that stresses people out. I mean, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. One of the major things for depression and anxiety, actually, for therapy is that you create a list every day and you check them out, even if it's just brushing your teeth. And it will make you feel better because it makes you feel accomplished. Mm-hmm. So if you can't do that, imagine how you feel if just things piling up onto each other and then you have completely loss of control of how you feel, of what you can get done. But you're still trying,
right?
You know?
Yes.
And then you end up binge watching, I don't know, Bachelor or Criminal Minds, something, right? Yeah, something. I don't know, TikTok, whatever. Mm-hmm. So it's just that you're trying and then you kind of fail at it, or you try but you don't feel like you tried enough, and then you just end up being in that state of mind where you're almost about to give up. And then your body's most likely screaming at you that, hello, I'm completely out of balance, you need to do something.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, referring to the highly shared BuzzFeed article of the millennial burnout, they talk about how you go into this and you're like, oh, I really need to send a package today. I need to go to the post office and send a package or like a letter or something that is simple, but it like sits in the side of your room for months because you're like, that is way down on the priority list. I'm not trying to do that right now. And imagine the heartache that I'm going to have to go through to do this. You know, like it's those types of little tasks that just become so difficult because there's so many other things going on, and then you've just basically given up on it.
And think about the top priorities on your list. What are they? For instance, for me, it's getting into grad school. Think about the amount of effort and work that needs to get into that, me reading after them, me looking into their profiles to see, oh my God, can I actually work with this person? And then would I have a possibility? And then create a really, really well-written letter. Read their publications before you do that, email them, and then just wait. And then if they don't answer, then email again. Call the program. So there's so much that goes into just one thing. And yes, I do have a box actually for 2.5 weeks sitting next to my desk.
You know, we all have it. You know we do.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so when I was looking at all of your research and between the neuroscience and everything beyond stress in the brain, it's basically like ruining our brains, like, you know, just as a whole. And between specific processes and how your brain looks and how you could like actually see the deterioration and the resources being depleted, I wanted to get your idea of what the brain is on stress and what happens to the brain within that time.
So a little bit of stress is good for you. Actually, as a proud Hungarian myself, I can say that Hans Scheie from the 1930s discovered the phenomenon of stress. At least that's what psychology history has told me. So basically, he was studying mice and he realized that mishandled mice who he dropped or failed to inject well, sorry for PETA, but basically, he failed at doing a good job at handling these mice. And those mice ended up getting ulcers. Why? And he was like, what happened? You know, like, I thought I'm not the best lab assistant, but I thought I did something well. And then he started to research this idea of what really happened. And then he realized and discovered that there are 3 states. There's an alert state, there's a retention state, and there is an exhaustion state from stress. So the alert state is when anything, a stimulus is what researchers call any information that comes towards you and you perceive it and you're like, oh, information. And then if the information is important enough for you, for instance, oh, I just got a job interview, bing, and things are just going high and you start to think about the things and you start to work towards it, and there's adrenaline released in your body, which is the same stress hormone that if you use it way too much, then sorry, I mean, it's gonna exhaust eventually. Retention state is when you have 4 to 5 job interviews at the same time and you're trying to balance in between all of those and you're trying your best to perform the best at everything, but you're still handling it. And your body's still not too much out of balance where it just cries out for help. So at this point, we call it research homeostasis, which is just the basic balance of your body that it likes. It's a natural state that your body likes to be in. So at retention state, your homeostasis is a little bit out of balance, but it's still capable of handling that. And you're cognitively and et cetera, and you know, you sleep enough, you cognitively are well, et cetera, and then you're just trying your best, you know? And it sort of works. And then, so that's a little bit higher of a peak. And then the exhaustion state is just a straight drop down, even lower than the alert state. So your baseline is where you started, of your ability to release those hormones. It goes up a lot and then it drops even lower than the actual normal levels that it would secrete. So what happens? What happens basically is you kind of abuse that system, and it's not that it's not able to secrete any hormones anymore. It's just that your threshold for your ability to be able to get either just a tiny bit of that hormone is so high that it just stresses you out, and then your body's just responding as a shutdown. And it keeps getting that adrenaline, and it just keeps responding as a shutdown. I can't do it. I can't do it. You need to sleep. You need to eat, buddy. You're like, we're in trouble here. And it just can't. And your body's telling you can't, but you keep trying to push forward. So it's kind of like being in a desert without food and without water, but you want to run for it.
Right.
You can't, right? I mean, it's just there's not really a way to do that for a longer time.
No, you're gonna exhaust yourself.
Exactly, exactly. And I mean, your body evolutionarily is designed, even if our cognition is a lot higher than most primates, it is still designed as a survival mode. And your body is designed that if you don't have enough of the necessary needs to keep you at homeostasis for a longer time or bounce back into homeostasis after a shorter period of time, what's going to happen is your body's going to think that it's in incredible danger. And it's just going to be like, no, sorry, we can't give you any more. No more focus. You can't. And I mean, it's a little bit of a dumb it down extreme level of that, but basically, eventually, that's what your body does.
Right.
And think about when we just mentioned that if you're in anxiety state, you want to get things done, right, on the list. So what if you can't? How are you going to feel? Boo-boo, right? Never really good. So this is why, actually, the clinical diagnosis of anxiety, any kind, mainly general, actually, meaning the general anxiety, GAD. What does that stand for? General Anxiety Disorder, yes. Okay. Too many acronyms in my head. So basically, general anxiety disorder has the highest likability to be comorbid, which means that it co-occurs as a disease with depression. Why? Because you're going to feel basically really bad about yourself that you can't even get out of bed, or you're so hyper everything that even just noises started to annoy you. This is actually something that's happening to me, that any noise that's out of my control, it starts to become a stressor that happens to be something that's annoying, and I have a hard time focus on something, even if I have energy, because my anxiety state is high, so that my threshold for receiving any kind of thing that would bother me is high. So pardon me, it's low. So basically, any kind of small stressor that you just put in there, my body's going to react like it's a disaster, right? And a lot of people probably feel that way. And this is why people get more emotional, et cetera, because also anxiety has to do with a specific part of the brain called the amygdala. And that wonderful little amygdala also stands for almond for Latin, or in Latin. So basically those little almond-shaped two tiny pieces of your brain is attached to your hippocampus in your middle of the brain, which is, hippocampus is your memory hub. I think most would be familiar with that, hopefully. So these guys are right next to each other. And what happens is, evolutionarily it was designed that, okay, if you have, let's say if you put your hand in fire, you're gonna learn real fast that you just don't want to put your hand in fire again, right?
More of that.
Because it hurts. So being in pain is an emotional response. Therefore, you will learn that shiny little thing that looks so cool, you don't want to touch it, but you can look at it. Because if you look at it, it doesn't hurt, but if you touch it, it will. And your hippocampus is right next to your amygdala for those reasons. It wants to make sure, that is why also for traumatic events, it's so incredibly difficult to get rid of throughout your entire life. Because think about, like, trauma is just an extreme amount of stress, an extreme amount of problems, negative feelings, negative emotions, et cetera, happening. And what eventually, if you can't get rid of that, what really happens is neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity happens everywhere in your brain, most of the time. It happens a little bit less when you're older, but it's still possible. It happens a lot when you're a kid. And that is why you want to protect people who are a lot younger from a lot of things, because their brains are still developing.
Neuroplasticity, hold on, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that is basically the, I would say, connection between the amygdala and the hippocampus, between memories and stimuli and what it makes you feel. Is that
almost? So neuroplasticity is actually the amount of the volume of that certain brain area could get larger, or it could have stronger connections. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, but the general connectivity is what we call, or it depends on which areas connect to each other. I don't personally know what the connection between amygdala and hippocampus is by name, but there is a connection there, obviously. So that what we call is when the amygdala in and of itself exists, and then the hippocampus in and of itself exists, and there's just firing of neurons or electrochemical information going in between the two areas. That's what we call neuroconnectivity.
Okay.
So if that connectivity is strong, that means that you are more likely to respond to emotional stimuli, or you were more likely to encode, which more like Yeah, I'm trying not to use so many technical words, pardon me. You're more likely to try to remember things, or you're more likely to remember things that are highly emotional, or that have an emotional significance to you.
Right.
So, for instance, the neuroplasticity, rather, is the fact that if you're overly emotional, it's more of like a clinical diagnosis for a long time, and you're unable to get rid of that. What happens is your amygdala starts to grow because there are more neurons that will be, because it's more active, and it will think that there are more things to learn here. So neuroplasticity has to do with learning also. So if you through at some sort of conditioning, you learn to be more emotional, and then you keep doing that for a long time, what happens is your amygdala is going to get a little bit larger. Unfortunately, it's possible that your hippocampus can actually shrink a little bit. So since they're right next to each other, there could be a trade-off there, which might not be the best. There are a lot of studies about this. There's some controversy about this too. But basically what happens is neuroplasticity is your ability for your brain to learn, not just on a neurochemical level, but eventually structure your brain to that specific learning environment. So for instance, if you learn for the rest of your life, like researchers do, most likely your hippocampus is bigger, most likely, than as a ratio than the rest of your brain is. So think about it that way, that it's a physical growth of certain elements in your brain.
It would be a trade-off. So in terms of when we go back to your example of someone who's researching for the rest of their life, or someone who's working 4 jobs and they're waiting for the next interview and they're already real high up on the stress level, how would you say to come down from that, to be able to get down to a homeostasis level?
So the person who works 4 jobs and is ready for the 5th interview, if they're incredibly resilient and if they feel okay in that state of mind, which for other people would be incredibly difficult, then those people are already resilient. They're already fine. They don't necessarily need to. Yeah. If they're not, well, a couple of things you can do. For instance, you can step away from the problem, and if there are other things that just trying to climb in there, be like, no, I need me time. Slow down. So what you need to do is kind of step away from everything, take a hike, something, go to the gym, and then just listen to some music that you would definitely know that you can only focus on that song and your muscles at that point. Something along the lines that makes you really happy and puts you in that state of mind where you won't think about your problems, just for a little bit. And then after that, revisit the problems with a renowned energy. Another thing that I recently heard about that was actually pretty cool is that there's a chemical in your brain called dopamine. Dopamine is really known at its classic level for reward system, right? If it's abused, then you abuse drugs, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it's not only that. Dopamine helps you to learn also. So one cool thing that your brain can do, and I heard this from a Stanford neuroscientist, a podcast with a Stanford neuroscientist, rather, and he was explaining that once your brain is so focused and it just secretes adrenaline constantly, which helps you to focus, right? Because that's your alert state. Even if you're a little bit over to the curve of getting exhaustion, you're still trying to put yourself into that alert state with focusing on certain things. And even, as I mentioned before, a little stress is okay. So when there's a little stress happening, that's when you're just basically alert. You're able to focus. Right now I'm not stressed out. I don't shake, I don't sweat. But I'm talking to you, which means I'm in an alert state, which means that adrenaline is going in my body. Maybe not to the same level as if I jumped off a building, which is scary, or if I rode a motorcycle, right? Jump off with bungee jumping, not like jump off.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't mean it that way. Or you rode a motorcycle, for instance, right? So there's a difference in excitement. So basically, if you're so focused on something, even if you care about it so much, like me researching the future labs that I'm interested in, a little bit anxiety provoking, a little bit too much on the emotional level because I just really want to get in. But at the same time, it's super interesting of what those other people do, because that's possibly what I could do also. And when interests match, I'm like, ooh, this is even better. But what if you're not at that excitement level where you kind of start to feel tired? Let's say you code, and then you start to get into the same problem for the 50th time, and you're just getting a little bit tired, a little bit agitated, and you're like, God damn it, I can't really figure this one thing out, and it's pissing me off. Like, I just feel like I want to stop, or I just feel like I can't get it done, and you start to get a little bit tired. What happens is, for instance, one of the things that could release dopamine is laughter. So if you just start laughing at how ridiculous that problem is that you're trying to figure out, or how ridiculous that for the 26th time you just couldn't figure out, and you searched through GitHub and you just can't figure out one code that you need, and you tried everything and you're like, God, oh my God, this is so ridiculous. Basically, with that, nothing else but just neurochemical energy will be released in your body. It won't use any more glucose from your body, just like adrenaline does, or the high stress state does. It won't make you crave more. It's just energy purely from neurochemical release of dopamine. So then you come back to this with a little bit more of a mellow kind of state, not a sleepy, but more of a less emotional, more happy state. And then you see the problem from a different perspective. Yeah, another thing that you can do and that is why I also have a knowledge about this, is because of the yoga instructions that I've learned. So basically, if you start to step away from the problem, and then if you start your best, or try your best to just go ahead and start connecting with yourself and start to ask the right questions. Why am I upset? Why do I feel this way? Let's figure this out. Let me look into myself as a little mirror, or just go ahead and look into a mirror, and just start to think about what is going on. Why are you feeling this way? And along with that thought, you can start to meditate on what is really happening inside your body, and is it really important? Is it really worth that much stress? Do you really have to put yourself that much torture just so that you could solve this one problem? Right. Or can you come back to it?
Right.
Can you take a break? Things like that.
We're not invalidating the feelings and saying that they're not needed, but that we feel them, and then we figure out why and see what we can do next.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that you can easily do that helps you put you back into homeostasis from this extreme anxiety state, or even just a heightened alert state, to back to a more normal. So there's two pathways in your autonomic nervous system, which autonomic nervous system is responsible for most of your vital functions, so like heart rate and breathing, and etc. Things that you don't have to think about, it just happens automatically. And digestion, things like that. So there is the sympathetic, which is the alert state or fight and flight state. That's where your adrenaline goes up, your pupils dilate, your digestion is kind of put on hold for a minute, your heart rate starts to kind of go a little bit faster, your lungs start to expand a little bit because you're ready to fight, right? As I mentioned, it's evolutionary.
Right.
So the other state is the complete opposite. You just want to chill, you want to recuperate, you want to fix illnesses that are in your body, so you allow some time for you want to sleep, you want to have sex, you want to eat, things like that. So one way, for instance, to overkill is just take a step down and breathe. Just focus on your breathing. So one of those things might be important. There are other methods, of course. If some people don't feel as comfortable with breathing methods like Wim Hof, but there are a lot of people who believe in that, even though, for instance, I don't consider that too well for me because it's too close to a specific emotional state for me that I don't like. But I cannot say that the research behind what Wim Hof is doing is actually incorrect. So if you don't know Wim Hof, look it up. It's cool. It's really cool. But there are other, but there are other kinds of things. If you just start paying attention on your breathing, if you just start to do some deep breathing, which even more helps you to decrease that anxiety state. And what happens is that you start to tip the balance back into homeostasis from too anxious or too relaxed to a normal level. And it depends what you feel. If you feel too relaxed, just take a couple of excited breathing and stuff and just start to hyperventilate for a minute or two, and then you'll feel ready. But of course, that's the opposite side of when you're way too excited then you just have to take a breath or two.
Okay.
And actually your body does this for you too. Not all the time, but sometimes. So sometimes when your body doesn't have enough oxygen, what it does is that it gives a big inhale, and then another inhale, and then just releases long. And it's kind of a sigh. You don't necessarily recognize the two inhales. Again, it's an autonomic state. You don't really recognize that it happened unless you focus on it, right? But you just kind of hear this, that kind of the sigh. And with that, you let things go. So what happens if you don't breathe well? Most of us who work in offices, sit all the time, etc. I mean, you don't really pay attention on your breathing, do you? It's not like you sit in traffic and be like, are my lungs okay? I think so. You don't do that.
I don't think I should.
No, I don't think
should, maybe.
Maybe, most likely. So most of the times our breathing is shallow. So, and we don't know that, and we don't recognize it until we start moving, and we're like, why do I feel so weird, right? So if you don't breathe and you don't use your if you breathe but mostly shallow, and you don't use your lungs' capacity, what happens is that as you inhale, you deliver oxygen into your body, which is also a wonderful nutrient and resource, and without oxygen, you would be just basically brain dead or dead completely. So you need oxygen, and you need sufficient amount of oxygen for your brains to work. And then with exhaling, you decrease your CO2 levels, your carbon dioxide levels, because that's the product of what's coming out of your body. So what happens when you breathe, when you start to pay attention on deep breathing and etc., you start to feel just basically a little bit, your body recognizes that you are out of balance chemically inside. And also think about that if you start to inhale big ones, or as we talked about, you just take a little bit of a break, you do a small 1 to 2 minute, preferably 5 minutes breathing exercise, and you come back to it, what happens? You will feel regenerated because there's a lot of oxygen in your brain that is ready to go. So you do need oxygen just like you need sugar, and any digested food that you eat is just going to be basically sugar, and that's the energy that's going on. And you need at least those two things for any kind of function, no matter what you do.
Yes.
Right? So another thing that you can do, which is, it could be dangerous eventually, but as I mentioned, stress is different for people. Maybe I haven't mentioned this, but okay, so stress is different for people. Some people completely just refrain from eating. Some people actually go onto the other side and they just start stress eating.
Yes.
Right?
I
So
feel like that's me.
I'm the opposite. I'm the one who starves themselves, and I just roll on coffee for 12 hours and be like, it's 3 p.m. I should eat something.
Oh my God.
Hence all the rest of the stress problems. Anyway, basically what happens is, just like with depression, etc., also with stress, you can either sleep a lot or you can just sleep very little. The end result is that you end up feeling tired either way. So same thing with the stress response towards eating. If you just keep eating a lot, that means that you're not necessarily, you might be emotional about the stress that you have, and you try to compensate with food as a comfort, or it could be that you recognize and your body recognizes that, oh my God, there's so much going on over here, I need energy, and then you start eating. The good thing about food, if you eat well and healthy, is that no matter what foods you eat, basically it's going to translate into sugar in your body. But what else all those nutrients do in your body is important, right? So with stress, also diabetes and obesity, kind of a co-occurring issue. Why? Because basically obesity comes from, or it could come from, that you are a stress eater, and then your body will need more efficient foods, which is high in calories, high in sugar, and high in carbohydrates, and those are just going to be wanted. So you have these cravings, and that is why I say you have to be careful, and you have to know yourself. For instance, for me, who has the stress response of just completely not eating, if I start to eat something, my body will start to automatically shift into the rest and digest state, which is also known as the parasympathetic state, because the food will start to stimulate my autonomic nervous system, be like, hello, it's time to rest. But what if I don't let it do it? It won't basically digest the food well enough, and it's not good for you. And basically, one of the reasons why obesity or diabetes can come with these things also with the stress eaters is that they don't take enough nutrients, and they already take the food in that is not necessarily the best in nutrients, and then they start to take a lot of it, and then it just kind of rests around you and just hangs out there, and it causes eventually problems because basically you secrete as much energy out of it as you can, but you're just not going to use as much. I mean, or it's just too much, right? Mm-hmm. So that also could be a problem. So you have to know your body in terms of digestion and what can you eat and what can you not, and that's up to you. The diet is like super personal. You do you. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say what you should do. All I'm saying is there's a possibility for folks who have a specific anxiety response that eating and taking a break could also help with stimulating. But again, so we talked about breath work, we talked about eating possibly, we talked about coming back to a problem, we talked about getting a nice laughter in there.
I like those.
Right?
Yes.
So they're super easy to do. And instead of breaking your hand on that wall and just keep breaking your hand on that wall, just come back to the wall, let your hand heal. Come on, it's not that hard. I mean,
Right.
Even if you think that you're out of time, we always have more time than we think we have.
Right.
And that's something that it's up to our perception how important and how urgent those are that we have to do.
Yes.
And that's actually a personal faulty. I always think everything's urgent. I always think everything's priority. And then my self-care is very bottom list. Not good.
Not good.
Yeah.
That is not what we want to do. So, I mean, you know, for you and I, we're in the millennial generation, and the millennials have just become the biggest generation in the workforce.
Woohoo!
Which is but you know, like we are in this, and also I noticed that the American Psychological Association just noted us as the most stressed out generation in history. So there's two things, woo woo.
Yeah.
But so for us millennials, can we do like a 2-minute breath work exercise to help them out?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's try one.
Okay.
Okay?
Right.
So basically what you do is if you feel comfortable, you close your eyes. So then what happens is all the stimulation that's around you is going to reduce.
Okay.
So mainly you just try to shut out everything. If it's impossible, at least close your eyes and just try to clear your thoughts.
Okay.
You place one hand on belly, one hand on the chest. You kind of lift up your chest so you can feel it. If some people have back problems, you can try to sit up as much and high as possible. But you know, if you can't, that's okay. Don't stress your body.
Okay.
Just as long as it feels comfortable. And then you start to inhale, and you feel that your belly is rising. Then your chest. And then you exhale, and then you feel all of that comes towards your spine. Do you feel that?
I do.
So the important part about starting your breath in your belly is that below your diaphragm, it's just there's more expansion of the lungs. Even though you think the lungs are up here, they're actually both under a little bit of your diaphragm, and they're up here too. Mm-hmm. So if you breathe up here most of the time to your chest, that's also a little bit of a response to get ready to fight. Whereas if you breathe down here, it's more relaxing. But if you use the entire capacity of your lung, you have to feel that both of them are expanding. Mm-hmm. Okay? So I'm just going to breathe with you and guide you through it. Close your eyes. Just inhale into your belly. Feel the chest rise. Hold it. And exhale slowly. Feel both of them come towards your spine. Very good.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you do this just for 1 minute, totally fine.
1 minute.
And if you feel like you can do it longer, do it longer. If you want to lay down, do that. It's totally okay as long as you feel that your lung, basically your rib cage, has enough space to expand to. Then just do that. So yeah,
I like that.
It's called deep breathing. It's really easy. The hardest part about it is always not the physical part, but the mental part. Mm-hmm. Right? So just clear it all out. The good thing is that if you think about things that you start to count your breath. For instance, if you realize that eventually after like 3 or 4 breaths, you still think about the laundry that's going on and the kids are screaming outside and blah, blah. You just got to come back and start counting the inhale, counting the exhale. That's called box breathing. You can either hold at the top, hold at the bottom, which helps with oxygenation and deoxygenation, or you could just count all the way up to 4 and then count down to 4. Down from 4 or whatever, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
Inhale and exhale. If that's really hard for you, then just think about the word in and then out.
That's nice.
But as long as you pay attention on the breath and then the body movement, and that is why we tell you to put your hands over here so you can actually feel what's going on, and it helps you to focus on what is going on.
Right.
So as long as you have that body focus and some sort of way, either the pressure you feel, either the expansion of your body, and I'm just going to say the expansion of your body, then basically, as long as you can put your attention to that, and it's a relaxing thing because all you do is just close your eyes and pay attention to that one thing, not the million things that are already going in your mind, then it's just going to help you to relax.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just so easy. You can do it at your desk if you need to. You can do it wherever, and it's
if it's
that
really
easy.
that embarrassing for you, just go to the bathroom and do it there.
Yep.
Just
sit
1 minute.
in the stall and calm down. It's fine.
I mean, honestly, whatever you need, as long as you feel good about it,
right.
and as long as you come out of it as, okay, I feel ready, and that is why I said pace your time. At least 1 minute, at least a couple of breaths. But if you can do more, do more. And eventually you realize that it will help you, and then the amount of time that you need to set aside for these things kind of depends on your daily basis. It depends on your experience, depends on your comfort level. Same thing with meditation. Sometimes someone can't just do 10 minutes of meditation because they just can't, even if they're the most experienced ones. You just, something's up, right? And it might need a little bit more time to fix it, or it might need to just not think about it and then come back to it, right? Even if meditation is something is it some sort of a tool to help you not to think about things, it could be that maybe just even meditation isn't going well right now, so just go ahead and step away from that too.
Right.
Just go binge watch some show and then come back. Just make sure you pay attention on your diet and stuff like that, and then make sure you move enough every day.
Right.
Right?
Yes. So the other thing that I was going to ask you, which I thought about, so, we're all in the COVID-19 crisis at the moment. Many people are working from home. So, part of the stress that people were experiencing before COVID-19 happened, at least from personal experience also, is just work-life balance. You couldn't find a work-life balance for however long you could figure it out. You're like, I'm always working, I'm always thinking, I'm always on the clock because I have a phone in my hand that people can reach me at all times, or something like that. How, in your opinion, do you think this being at home and working at home a lot for people, do you think it's going to help or hinder the work-life balance process?
I think it depends on the person. For most people who have that habitualized, I'm going to work and I'm going to work there at my workplace, at my desk, or at my factory or whatever, and then I come home and then I rest at home. For those people, actually, it's going to be really difficult. Why? Because your habits are just out of balance. They're completely gone. So you need to build new habits. And some people have not the best home life, so some people have their entire family home and they have kids at home, right? Because schools are closed too. So most likely it just elevates the stress levels, and most likely you're just locked in with all those people, and even though you love them the most, that doesn't mean that they can't annoy you.
Oh, yes.
Right? And everybody needs a little bit of personal space, and work is possibly providing that for some people. It's also more easy to, in your mind, categorize and build these mental schemas that work is work, home life is home life, here I can relax, here I need to push. But what if you bring that work home? It's difficult for those people to think about how to even balance that, how to restructure that work so it doesn't interfere too much with their personal life, but also how to not to be so lenient on the work that you're doing because you're at home and because you feel more relaxed. So I think that this and we're well into the COVID-19 at this point, where people most likely figured this out, and most likely they've started to know and feel that, okay, I will need to dress up, I will still need to act like as if I'm at work, because those habits are so built in that it will actually put you into that specific mindset that you're in work. So again, it all depends on that mindset and depends on that perception. If some people they hated, driving 2 hours to work, which they think that they could have done from home, and here's the example that they can, well, good for you. Applause, right? I mean, there's another reason why things like Twitter and other companies like that are going completely remote as an option, because why not? If it makes some people happy, why not? If it helps someone not to have to come in from San Bernardino to LA, why not? As long as they can do their job well. And I think that's a personal decision that people will make eventually. And COVID-19, the good things about it is that it allowed for this space of remote work and home office to open up for people. So for instance, maybe you don't like it now, but as an option later on in your life, it could be a good thing. So it's not necessarily a devil, but at the same time, it is still difficult. And again, the only reason why most likely, not the only reason, most of the reasons why it's difficult is because of the stresses at home, the unreliable state of what is going on in the world at this point. Can I go out? Will I get sick? Will I get my grandma sick if I go out? What's going to happen? What if we get a vaccine? I'm scared of vaccines. There's so many conversations in people's heads at this point. And it's very understandable. Nobody likes to be unstable.
Oh, yeah.
Just in and of itself. But when the world is unstable, everyone's freaking out. And that's really understandable, because what people like is habits and stability, right? So those things are very important. If the workplace is unstable, maybe you feel better at home, right? And maybe you can rebuild those habits to work at home more efficiently and better. And then also maybe, personally, I feel like that I had the first impression of, I have a phone, I have a laptop, I have a desktop, like I'm always available. I work at 8 p.m. and then I work until 11 p.m. and then next day I worked, until 5 p.m. So it's so different.
Right.
But if you're okay with that, as long as you take the personal time for yourself that you need at whatever time of the day, that's good. Like, just keep it up. And you have to build habits. A good thing that I think would be coming out of this is that people who work from home have that extra, depending on your commute, 5 minutes to 3 hours, right? Let's just say that. You have that extra time to be at home, to get up, not look at your phone, not look at your notification, not listen to any screaming children. Get up and stretch for at least a minute or two. Do a breathing exercise or meditate, something that will actually just, as soon as you wake up, you'll be happy and grateful that you woke up. Even if most people don't feel that way, that's okay. But eventually you will learn that this situation has also granted some good things, even though it started off from something really bad. And that's okay, because you will learn how to basically build these new habits, and you will learn how to live this way as well. You have a lot of people to share this experience with, because a lot of people most likely, you work from home office, I work from home office. I mean, there's a story here about COVID, right? There's just helps with social connection also. Right. Tell your problems to others, and if others can assimilate, you can listen to each other. It's kind of like therapy. So those things are also important. Another thing that I feel that could come out from this in a really a good way, is that think about what mental health issues are arising with the stress, with the depression, with the not feeling that you're accomplishing, etc., all the confidence issues. These issues are up there, and it has always been up there. It was just hidden. But now that COVID-19 hit, a lot of people start to realize, oh, it's actually a little bit worse than I thought.
People have become a lot more accustomed to talking about it now
Exactly.
that it's like such a shared problem.
Exactly. So this will also help the rise of mental health as a less stigmatized way of discussion. So I have a feeling that it's not the worst thing that happened to us. There could be worse than this, like Spanish flu and all that kind of stuff, where there's just way more people. But you know what? I'm not going to judge. Like, it doesn't matter. There could be good things coming out of this. And maybe we just don't see it yet. Maybe some people already see it. Maybe some people will never see it. That's okay. Folks who have lost their family members, I mean, there's not really a good way for them to perceive this.
At this point, not.
No, but at the same time, just think about that. How can they reflect on this? Not necessarily as a blessing, but it will be a stressor for them, an additional stressor for them, for instance, to go through to the next step and try to cope with this and take this as a whole of ball of stressor and try to figure it out and then become more resilient from it. Because once you're hit with that extreme amount of stress, you have two ways. You have the highway or the no way, right? So you either go through it and you rise from it, or you're gonna be the ashes and you'll never rise from those. So you wanna make a choice of that. And it's okay to fall down, it's okay to fail a million times one, that's okay. Million times whatever, 200, you'll get up. And you'll get up again and again and again. Resilience is part of that getting up process, preparing yourself to the next stressor, to the next battle you need to take. And if you keep just losing, as long as you don't lose that confidence that you have inside you that you are going to make it one day, then you're already resilient. So if these folks, for instance, who have lost a lot of things, lost jobs, lost family members, etc., yes, it is not a good thing. But if you can get up from this, you've grown a little bit. Yes. And you have to think about it this way because otherwise it will destroy you. And I'm not saying you've grown from, a lost job or like a lost family member because no one can replace that. It's more about if you get through this, then you can get through more. And that's the mindset that you should take. Right. And that's when I said, like, if someone can feel really happy at that, interview, 4 interviews, and then the 5th one's coming along, and you're like, hell yeah, let's bring it on. Those people just have something very special, and it's good. It's good for them. Good for them. Yeah, I'm trying to become one of those people eventually, but good for them. And it's an awesome thing to experience that you're almost invincible. And it's not because you didn't stress. It's just because you stressed, and then you coped, and you came out of it, and then your threshold now is a lot higher.
Right.
So you can throw at me more, and I will come out of it. And if you do that, wonderful.
Right.
If you can't, breathe, get help, etc., just try your best to make sure that you're okay. And if you don't know how to be okay, then ask other people, ask for advice, etc., because that's also really important. So another thing to mention, breathing exercises and meditation is your own work. On top of, if you have any big issues, talk to a therapist, go to a doctor, etc. These are just kind of homework for you to do. It's kind of like you brush your teeth every day, hopefully, so this could be another thing that you could do every day.
Right.
It's self-care, right?
Yeah, and it does so many good things for you. We know from research it's great for relieving stress, obviously, but as well as reducing your depression levels, reducing possibilities for heart diseases. Like, there's so many things that can come up from just these constant stressors. And also, I mean, in the long run, there's within developmental abilities from your early 20s on, like that's when you're supposed to get these, I guess, resilience building exercises and pieces within you that you can bring to your next chapter of your life. And a lot of people, at least for millennials coming in, they're, thinking about raising kids soon and all that kind of stuff, or they might already have kids. And if they're stressed out during pregnancy, that kid's going to have the heightened stress levels in their lifetime because of the cortisol levels. So it's like, if you're thinking about it from a future perspective, the building resilience is going to be a key factor in not only our lives in personal level, but the workforce and just in general for the population. So I guess for, your send-off here, I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I want to, just give us one thing at the end of this to tell us how we should go about this.
Yeah, so I think that to build resilience, you need to recognize that stress is not your enemy. Stress is going to help you to get through the small problems one by one. And then if you experience too much stress and then you feel like you can't handle everything, that's okay. No personal judgment, nobody's gonna judge you, nobody's gonna tell you that you're fired, etc. Just take a step back, care for yourself, even care for yourself a little bit more than on a daily basis. Make sure that you have enough food, energy, etc., and then prepare yourself for the next level or for that same exact problem that you might have not figured out yet. It is okay to take breaks. It is more than okay to kind of sit back and say, you know, I had enough of this for today. Let me just do a little bit of something else, and then let me come back to this. And it's more than okay. As long as you are eating quite healthy, and you discuss that with your dietitian, go ahead. If you move, at least just 10 minutes, you know? You don't need too much. You don't need to do push-ups. You don't need to do pull-ups, etc. If you're a guy and comfortable, go ahead. If you're a girl comfortable, go ahead. Whatever you want. But as long as you feel like you're moving. It doesn't have to be running, whatever you want. Whatever your body can adjust to and you feel okay with it. And then, so those things of self-care and moving, and within self-care, there's the meditation and self-reflection of the entire day of what happened, of how do I feel? Do I feel enough? Do I look pretty? Whatever you care about personally, right? It's never a good thing to look into social media and say, oh, this XYZ has a wonderful life. I want it too. No, that's mainly fake, right? It's the highlights of their moments. Right. So don't judge them by that, but then also don't judge yourself as a comparison to it. So what you really want to get out of this to become more resilient is to make sure that you listen to yourself and you know your body, and then you don't judge yourself. And with all of that stuff, you need at least some sort of meditation or some sort of being in touch with yourself. And if you stress out too much, and if you burn out, and then you constantly burn out, I mean, your first burnout should be your red flag of, hello, we need to do something about this. We can't just keep going on the way we are. And if you face burnout, then try your hardest to just listen to your body. Pay attention. You want to make sure that you will not causing more damage. Because guess what? You're in your early 20s. You keep working this way, well, you might not even make it to 40 without a heart disease.
Right.
Or if you raise children like this, and then you're just constantly in the burnout and the stress and the traumas and etc., your kids might have the best chance to actually live a stress-free life because they either grew up in that environment or they were exposed to it during pregnancy. So I'm just saying, and again, I'm just saying, I'm not a doctor, I'm not all those things. I've read a lot about these, and I have learned a lot about these, and I will learn even more. But at the same time, it's just, you can become resilient by befriending stress to a certain level, and then also recognizing what that level tips over too much, and then how to bring it back to normal. And how to talk about it is another thing. So if people don't feel okay talking about it, talk to yourself about it. I mean, you should be your own best friend. You should be your own person.
Right.
Just listen to yourself.
I really, this is fascinating stuff.
Cool.
You've said it all. Thank you so much for being on.